agree with the statement that man is the king of nature?
The machine man is the most miserable beast that exists in this vale of tears. But he has the pretension and even the insolence to call himself the king of nature. Man, that poor intellectual animal that mistakenly calls himself man, has invented thousands of very complicated and difficult machines. And he knows quite well that it sometimes takes long years of learning before getting to know and use a machine. But he completely forgets the fact that he is a more complicated machine than all the ones he has invented. There is no man who does not have wrong ideas about himself. The serious problem is that he does not want to realize that, in fact, he is a machine.
But on what basis can you say something like this, that man is a machine?
If you observe any human machine carefully, you will be able to verify this. The human machine has no freedom of movement. It only functions by means of multiple and diverse inner influences and outer shocks. The intellectual animal is a poor, talking puppet with memory and vitality, a living doll who has the absurd illusion of thinking that he can do when in reality he can truly do nothing. Imagine for a moment a doll, a mechanical and automatic doll controlled by a complex mechanism. Imagine this puppet. It has life. It falls in love, speaks, walks, wishes, goes to war, etc. Imagine that this puppet can continuously change its owner. You must imagine that each of the owners is a different person with a particular set of criteria, a particular way of having fun, feeling, living, etc., etc. For example, one owner who wants money will push certain buttons and then the doll will go into business. Another owner, half an hour later or several hours later, will have a different idea and will make the doll dance and laugh. A third owner will make it fight. A fourth will cause it to fall in love with a woman. A fifth will make it fall in love with another. A sixth will make it fight its neighbor and create a problem with the police. And a seventh will make the doll move to a new house. The doll in this example has really done nothing, but it thinks it has. Without a doubt, it has all happened in the same way as when it rains, when it thunders, when the sun shines. But the poor doll thinks that it can do. It has the absurd illusion of having done everything, when in fact it has done nothing. In reality, its respective owners were the ones who have amused themselves with a poor mechanical doll. This is the poor intellectual animal, dear friends, a mechanical doll like the one in our illustrative example. It is a puppet made of flesh and blood, controlled by the legion of subtle, energetic entities that constitute as a whole what we call the ego, the pluralized I. The Christian gospel qualifies all those entities as demons, and their true name is legion. Same in Hinduism, where they are called Danavas or Asuras. In Buddhism, they are called psychic aggregates.
Then what is the way to become free? What is the way to become a true man?
Whoever truly wants to stop being a mere mechanical doll must eliminate each of those entities which, as a whole, constitute the I. Those who truly want to stop being mere mechanical dolls must start by admitting and comprehending their own mechanicalness. The intellectual animal is a machine, but a very special machine. If this machine begins to understand that it is a machine, if it is well directed, and if circumstances so allow, it may stop being a machine and become a man. The first thing we must urgently comprehend in depth and at all levels of the mind is the fact that we do not have a true individuality. that we lack a permanent center of consciousness. That at one time we are one person and at another we are a different person. It all depends on the entity which controls the situation at any time.
But how is that possible? It is difficult to imagine that we are not a single individual.
What creates the illusion of unity and integrity of the intellectual animal is firstly, the sensation of having a physical body. Secondly, his or her name and surnames. And finally, the memory and a certain number of mechanical habits established in him or her through education or acquired by simple and stupid imitation.
Thank you very much for the explanation. Can you please continue and tell us how we can stop being a machine and become a free human being?
The poor intellectual animal will not be able to stop being a machine as long as he does not have the courage to eliminate, by means of deep comprehension and in successive order, each of those metaphysical entities that as a whole make up what we call the ego, the I, the myself. Each idea, each passion, each vice, each affection, each hatred, each desire, etc., 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 has its corresponding entity, and the whole of those entities depends completely on circumstances, on the change of impressions, on events, etc. The screen of the mind constantly changes colors and scenes. It all depends on the entity which controls the mind at any instant. The different entities that make up the pluralized I associate with each other. They form certain special groups according to their affinities. They fight against each other, they discuss, they are ignorant of each other, etc., etc., etc. The entity which today swears eternal love to a woman is later displaced by another entity that has nothing to do with that oath. Then the house of cards falls down, and the poor and disappointed woman cries in sorrow.
So it is important to eliminate the egos, the I's that we carry inside. Then should this not be taught in schools and colleges to all children?
School, college, and university teachers must study the revolutionary psychology and, out of humanity, orient their pupils along the marvelous way of the revolution of the consciousness. We do not deny that in intellectual education, a profession and a skill to earn money are necessary, but that is not all. That is secondary. The first or fundamental thing is knowing who we are, what we are, where we have come from, where we are going to, what the purpose of our existence is. The poor intellectual animal is not a man, but has inside itself, in a latent state, all the possibilities to become a man. It is not a law that those possibilities must unfold. The natural thing is that they get lost. Only by means of tremendous super efforts can such human possibilities unfold. There is much we have to eliminate, and there is much we have to acquire. Of course, the pluralized ego is in excess. It is something useless and harmful. It is logical to say that we have to develop certain powers, certain faculties, and certain capacities that the machine man thinks and believes he has, but which in reality he has not. When the pluralized I is dissolved, only the true being remains inside us.
But surely, this is something that cannot be done easily, as you just said. What are the obstacles we can expect?
When you try to stop being a machine, when you do not want to be a machine any longer, nature is against you. Nature has inside us, inside each of us, elements, powers, and forces that it activates to fight against us. It is inconvenient for nature that someone stops being a machine. This is an attack against its economy, and it has great powers to bring the rebels who want to fight it under control. This is the harsh reality of facts. Obviously, you are here to listen to me, and I am here to speak to you. But you can see right here how nature is working to bring you under control. If you pay due attention, you will notice that some of you have felt bored when listening to this lecture. Some of you have yawned. Some of you wish that our lecture had finished, etc. All these are nature's weapons.
If we are all machines, part of nature's economy, then do we have any say in our life, any control over our own life?
In no way could we deny that the law of recurrence processes itself at every moment of our lives. Certainly, in each day of our existence, there exists a repetition of events, states of consciousness, words, wishes, thoughts, volitions, etc. It is obvious that if you do not observe yourself, you cannot realize this unceasing daily repetition. If you truly want to get to know yourself, you must start by observing your own behavior when faced with the events of daily life. Observe your mechanical reactions when faced with the small events that take place in the bedroom, at home, in the dining room, in the street, at work, etc., etc., etc. Observe what you say, feel, and think. If we believe that we are good people, that we never behave in an unconscious and wrong way, we shall never change. First of all, we need to comprehend that we are mechanical people, simple marionettes controlled by secret agents, by hidden eyes. A lot of people live inside us. We are never the same person. Sometimes it is a mean person that expresses itself through us. Sometimes an irritable person. At any other instant, a generous or benevolent person. Later, a scandalous or slandering person. Then, a saint. Later still, a liar, etc. There are all sorts of people, all kinds of eyes inside each of us. We need to stop being simple machines, even if only for a few minutes each day. This will have a decisive influence on our existence. When we observe ourselves and do not do what an occasional I wants, it is obvious that we are then beginning to stop being machines.
You have described a very profound truth about human nature. How can we master our own behavior? How can we locate the eyes in our structure?
The organism of that three-brained biped, mistakenly called man, is a precious machine with 5 marvelous psychophysiological centers. The order of such centers is as follows: intellect, emotion, movement, instinct, and sex. Each of the 5 centers penetrates the whole organism, but they have their basic capital point somewhere in the organic machine. The center of gravity of the intellect is found in the brain. The center of gravity of emotions is in the solar plexus and in the specific nervous centers of the great sympathetic system. The center of gravity of movement is placed in the superior part of the spine. The center of gravity of instinct is to be found in the inferior part of the spine. The center of gravity of sex clearly has its roots in the sexual organs. Intellectual center is responsible for the elaboration of concepts, reasoning, memories, projects, analysis, etc., etc. The intellectual center is useful within its sphere. Taking it out of its gravitational field would be a serious mistake. The great realities of the spirit can only be experienced by the consciousness. Emotional center, cheerfulness, sadness, melancholy, euphoria, love or hatred are just some of the sensations produced by this center. Human beings clumsily waste their energies through the abuse of violent emotions produced by movies, television, football matches, etc. Motor center. We need to discover ourselves and fully comprehend all our habits. We must not allow our life to continue in a mechanical way. We need to study our habits. We need to comprehend them. They belong to the activities of the center of movement. It is necessary to self-observe our way of living, acting, dressing, walking, etc. Instinctive center. There are several instincts: the instinct of conservation, the sexual instinct, etc. There are also many perversions of instinct. Deep inside each human being, there exist subhuman instinctive and brutal forces, like criminal instincts, lust, cowardice, fear, sexual sadism, etc., which paralyze the true spirit of love and charity. Sexual center. This center is in charge of originating the so-called sexual energy. This energy, contrary to what many authors suppose, is not only in charge of the reproduction of the race, but is also responsible for the health of the physical body, the psychological balance, and the conquest of what is called the being.
And how does this relate to the egos? Where are the eyes present in the centers?
The I exerts control over the 5 inferior centers of the human machine: intellectual, emotional, motor, instinctive, and sexual centers. That is how the human being's life is reduced to psychological slavery, in which free will has almost disappeared. In the intellectual center, the eyes of preoccupations make hay while the sun shines. Covetousness projects ideas and plans for the future upon the poor mind. The emotional center also suffers the consequences of the abuse of the I. Self-love is seriously wounded when we are not paid as much as we think we deserve. Then comes hatred, resentment, etc. The motor center is used by vanity to take the machine out for a walk in the street, showing off like a peacock, believing that everybody is looking at it. Pride makes us compete, fight our competitor, and end up exhausted, only to win a meaningless medal and be able to appear in the national press the next day. Laziness alters the natural mechanisms of the instinctive center. When, due to a lack of will, we eat in a careless way, on a diet of frozen, preserved, and pre-cooked food. The energetic foundation of the sexual center is also plundered by the different psychological aggregates. Children start from an early age with the vice of masturbation, thus losing quite fundamental elements for their development. The deep ignorance in which humanity is living makes this center the most damaged.
Then it must be very important to understand the working of the I in each of the centers?
Whoever wants to dissolve the I must study its workings in the 5 inferior centers. We must not condemn our defects, neither should we justify them. The important thing is to comprehend them. The I works with each of these 5 inferior centers. And when we begin to deeply comprehend the mechanism of each of these centers, we are on the way to dissolving the I.
By doing so, it must be possible to live wisely?
If we want a definitive change, it is necessary that such a change first take place within us. To live wisely, we need to understand that the organic machine of the intellectual animal works in a 3-brained way. The first brain is the thinking center. The second brain is the emotional center. The third brain is the center of movement, commonly called the motor center. The 5 centers are distributed among the 3 brains, for each of them is autonomous. It has been demonstrated by practice that all of the abuses of the thinking brain produce an excessive loss of intellectual energy. The aesthetic sense, the mystical sense, ecstasy, and superior music are necessary to cultivate the emotional center. But the abuse of this brain produces a useless loss and waste of emotional energy. The new wave existentialists, the fanatics of rock, etc., are all abusing the emotional brain. Harmonious and balanced sports are very useful for the motor center, but the abuse of sport implies an excessive loss of motor energy, and the result is usually disastrous. With time, the wrong use of the 3 brains has progressively shortened life. In the pharaohs' ancient Egypt, human life expectancy was 140 years. Now, in these modern times of petrol and celluloid, in this time of existentialism and rock rebels. Human life expectancy is, according to some insurance companies, hardly 60 years. On the other hand, there is a religious community in Central Asia which consists of aged people whose average lifespan is between 400 and 500 years. The secret of long life of these Asian monks consists in the wise use of the three brains. Contemporary pedagogy leads students to abuse the thinking brain, with results well known to psychiatry. In the ancient schools of mysteries of Babylon, Greece, India, Persia, Egypt, etc., the pupils received integral information directed to their three brains through an intelligent combination of precepts, dances, music, etc., that served to inform each individual's three brains.
We are grateful to you for giving such valuable practical information. What else would you like us to remember and practice so we can live a better life?
In life, it is necessary to learn not to cause problems. Problems are just mental shapes which are created by the mind. A problem is a mental shape with two poles, a positive one and a negative one. Those shapes are held by the mind, and they stop existing when the mind stops holding them. What should we do? Solve problems? No, that is not necessary. Then what? What we need is to dissolve them. How can they be dissolved? Simply by forgetting them. You may think that it is impossible to forget problems, but it is possible. When you want to forget them, the only thing you have to do is to put any other center of the organic machine to work. Remember that the human being possesses three brains. Activate the emotional center or the motor center. That is the interesting thing, because then the intellectual center rests, and then we forget our problem. Do not suffer needlessly. Forget your problem, and it will dissolve. Do you like painting? Seeing an exhibition will be a good way to forget your problem. Or have some coffee, or a nice cup of tea. Go to a lake for a swim, or climb a mountain and laugh a little. Laughing makes you feel good and forget your problem. You could say, for instance, that in this way, it is not possible to pay a bill or a debt. I do not mean that we should not do anything, that we should not work, that we do not need money to live or to pay debts, etc. We should do all this, but without creating problems in our mind. People are afraid to forget their problems, and that is a very sad thing. Learning to live from instant to instant, from moment to moment, is what I recommend.